Hi, and welcome to our first Family Talk video, Preparing for More Independence. I am your host, Rebecca Downing, Senior Director of Communications and Parent Initiatives at Colgate. We're here to talk about things parents, family members, or guardians can do to help their student prepare for the independent environment that they will experience at college. Joining me today are Dawn LaFrance and Melissa Sporn. Melissa is a clinical psychologist with a specialty in developmental adjustments in adolescents and emerging adults. She is also the proud mama of a recently minted Colgate graduate, Samantha, class of 2022. Dawn is our Assistant Vice President of Counseling and Psychological Services here at Colgate. She and her team of counselors are here to support the mental health needs of students through group and individual counseling. So let's get started. There will be so much for a student to do when they start college, and they'll be navigating many new kinds of experiences on their own. Do you think there are ways that parents and guardians can help students prepare for this, both in a practical sense, as well as in terms of how they think about this shift to independence? And maybe you could talk a little bit about why that would be important. Melissa, could you start, please?
Sure. I like to encourage parents to see this transition as moving from coach to cheerleader. Quite literally. We're going from that giving advice, giving recommendations, giving suggestions, to really sitting on the sidelines and just kind of observing and going, yeah, you did that well, or, ooh, get back up. You got this. And what's really important is that piece about how might you handle this, recognizing that as students are going through this process right now, today, many of your kids are feeling uncomfortable. And I want them to be comfortable with the uncomfortable. I want them to begin to not know things and be okay about that, to be uncertain, to feel and experience the fears of this transition and the excitement, all the positive feelings as well, without us having to mitigate it and to smooth it and to make sure it's okay and to kind of gently carry them to. Rather, most of our parents kind of dropped us off and said, bye-bye. My parents changed my bedroom into a den. So I think within the weekend I left. So.
Thanks so much. What about you, Dawn?
Yeah, similarly, I so much appreciate Melissa's advice there. I was thinking about like a scaffolding approach. I think that given wherever you are with your child right now and how much of that coaching you do, I think you think about how to pull back on that over time. So if you're somebody who's been a very involved coach up to this date today, and your student's leaving for college in a month, you don't want to pull back too quickly. However, if you've been somebody that's maybe a little bit more hands-off, or your child's been away at prep school, private school, those kinds of things, then you might have a little bit of a different reaction to that. So I would think about it as scaffolding. How can you get your student more and more independent? What don't they do yet that they will need to do when they're in college? And some of this might be helping them with options. So not making decisions for them, but giving them, out of these three options, which would you do? So it might be more listening and giving possibilities rather than fixing. And as a parent, I know sometimes I like to get right in there and just fix the problem because it's easier. And my child has less anxiety afterwards. But I know that in this process, it's really important to pull back, make sure that our kids know how to do laundry before they leave, but that they also know how to have some difficult conversations with a peer before they leave. So thinking about what can they do now and have them do that all that they can, but also what will they need to do as they progress into their Colgate career.
Thank you so much. I would love you mentioned a couple specifics, Dawn, but maybe we could get a little more specific on some of the common areas of newness that would be important for families to be thinking about, and how can parents help their students spend some time thinking about and preparing for those new experiences over these next few weeks before they actually get to Colgate.
Yeah, so maybe I'll just continue for a minute and then welcome Melissa to join in after. I'm kind of going through a parallel process right now. So I've been working at Colgate for 21 years in the counseling center and doing different things at Colgate that have been really exciting with first year students and all of our students. But now I have a student of my own who's going away to college next month. So as I think about this parallel process and what I'm getting him ready to do, I'm kind of in a different place than I've been before. But one of the things I asked him to do last week was make his own doctor's appointment, because I've always been making those for him. But when he's away at college, I am not going to be calling the Student Health Services Center when he needs to go down there for something. So I think about those types of things. How can our students do more for themselves? If your student's been really independent, you might be in a different boat. But I think that a lot of our students, especially sort of where we are with COVID and how a lot of students have been living at home and doing things in a hybrid model or a virtual model for a long time and in different places at different points in high school. I think they're at a different place than students were maybe even 5 years ago. So I mentioned doctor's appointments, but I also think about laundry, cooking for themselves, or making their own food choices, making sure that they're getting enough sleep, some of those kinds of things that maybe we watch over a little bit and remind them of. When they're off on their own, we shouldn't be in that position to be doing that. So if over the next month we can start thinking about those specific things, I think that our student will be more prepared for when they go, when they launch, when this really happens.
So I'd like to piggyback on what Dawn said. I think all of that is really essential and important for parents to be contemplating, like, how much am I doing for my kid and how much could they actually be doing for themselves, including things like the packing. And what do I want in my dorm room and all of that. I think a big challenge for students arriving on campus is making friends. They've gone from a place, many of them, where they are friends with people they've known since nursery school or kindergarten, and now they're somewhere and they've never sort of experienced being in a place where they don't know anybody. And I really encourage parents to remind them that when they transitioned from elementary to middle, from middle to high, if they went to sleepaway camp or Boy Scout camp, that they had that uncomfortable, awkward experience where I don't really know anybody, or I have a friend, but I don't really know all these other people. And slowly how they made friends and how much time that took. Did it take a week? Did it take a month? Did it take 3 months? And recognizing that within 2 to 3 weeks, you feel more comfortable. And then, slowly, by October, these students are going to feel like Colgate's their home. And, they're going to be telling you about their adventures with their best friends,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love what you were just sharing, and it made me go into a different place in my head around friendships. And one of the things I often hear first years say, maybe even 3 weeks in, is, I haven't found my people yet, or my roommate's fine, but I don't see myself being friends with them. Mm-hmm. And I think it's important to anticipate that and reassure students, like you said, Melissa, that these things take time. And sometimes you don't get matched with a roommate who's going to be your best friend. And actually, I would say it's better not to have a roommate that's your best friend. I think that sometimes cohabitating is very different than friendship. So I always reassure people that it takes time. Sometimes you even think you have your best friend in October, and then it changes up second semester when you meet more people and realize that, hey, that person was what I call a convenience friend because we stuck together. We were in the same link group. They're great, but I think I'm going to sort of go over towards this friendship group, and being okay with that so that it's not being judged in a way that's like, oh, you're doing something wrong, but that's just sort of a natural evolution of finding your people, your clubs, your organizations, where you're going to head. Mm-hmm. So you'll be having these conversations hopefully throughout the year, but I think in anticipation. And I always think one of the best times to talk through these kinds of things with my children is in the car. Like if we're driving together, we're not like face to face looking at each other, but just like conversation in the car or on a walk, those kinds of things, maybe over the dinner table, but like not making it so formal that we have to sit down and talk about this, but just sort of see where it comes up and then see where it goes and help them through that. Think about, hey, what if this happens? Or what if this happens? Or even maybe sharing some stories about what happened to you or what you've heard happen to a cousin who just went through the college experience. Those kinds of things can be really helpful.
One of my favorite stories that I share with rising freshmen, I tell about one of my children who called me upset, usually in the evening, that's when these calls come in, feeling like they didn't have any friends, they didn't fit in, everybody else seemed so happy and clicky, they found their people, they hadn't found their people. And I asked them, if I asked the people on your floor how you're doing, what would they tell me they see? And they'd say, I'm happy, that I'm, outgoing, and, that I seem okay. And I said, I said, everybody's masking, hon. Nobody's found their people yet. They're just kind of, out there faking good until it feels good. And that's what you have to do. Like, get yourself out there, meet people, join clubs, join organizations, become a part of some things, and slowly you will get there. And she was like, yeah.
Oh, that's such a great example. I think about, so I run a number of therapy groups. And one of the things students will say in the therapy group is, I can actually be real in here and tell you all that I'm feeling vulnerable and I'm feeling like I don't fit in, or whatever the case is, whatever that thing is that's going on in their mind. And sometimes out in public, we don't feel like we can share those things. And I think in this age of social media, it gets even harder because of how people are showing themselves online. And it's always like the best picture. It's the most exciting time. It's when I'm doing really well is usually what's in our feed versus, I'm so anxious about this test tomorrow, or I'm not fitting in. People don't usually put that out there the same way that they put out all the good stuff. So I think we are comparing in our heads.
When you do that.
This is true. Yes. People don't know what to do with that. But it's one of the very refreshing things I think about group therapy, for instance, is we're not here to pretend that everything's perfect, because everything's not perfect. It's not supposed to be perfect. That's part of being human and going through a new adventure, is that we're going to have bumps in the road, and that's okay. Yeah.
One of the suggestions I would also give students is to make a list, even on their phone lists, of things that buoy them, things they can do when they're not feeling okay, when they're feeling lonely, when they're feeling frustrated, when they're feeling, disconnected, to remind them that they have friends from home, that they have family. We always, my mother would say, call your grandmother, and that would help buoy them. Going for a walk, going to the gym, watching your favorite old Netflix show, painting your nails, whatever it is. And they can just make a really long list, and that can be really productive when they're in those kind of lonely, sad moments.
So is that, Melissa, a suggestion that you make in thinking ahead and sort of preparing? A lot of what I've heard both of you talk about is that maybe students have an expectation for what school's going to be like. And that's totally natural. But are there expectations that are common where, like you just said, that, okay, you might get lonely or might feel overwhelmed, and for a parent to actually have that conversation with their student, like, let's make a list? Or do you think that flags fears that they might not already have? Like, how do you think about that?
So I encourage parents to kind of overtly talk about when they're struggling. And I will say, I've had a really stressful day. Lots of things didn't go the way I wanted them to go. But, I have these things I do to calm me down. So I'm going to go upstairs and I'm going to listen to George Winston and maybe take a bath, or I'm going to call my girlfriend Lisa, or I'm going to, go for a walk, or I'm going to pet my dog, or I'm going to, So what are the things? And then I'll say, do you have those things? Like, I'm curious. What are the things you do that help you calm down?
That's great. In this vein, are there specific topics that you think are really important to kind of use as framing in those conversations? I'm thinking about, you both talked about the making friends part, but there are also some other very important social decisions that students are going to be encountering when they get to school, such as alcohol and other drugs, relationships, those sorts of things. What kinds of conversations on those topics can parents or guardians have with their students in advance?
Along the lines of how we've been sharing so far, I'd like to just encourage parents to have an open door. So to bring up these topics. And again, not in a formal, we have to sit down and talk about some things before you leave, but more in an informal way, bring them up as you can and show that you're not going to be too judgmental. We all have judgments and we all want certain things for our kids, but the more I think we put out those judgments, the more we tell them that we're not ready to really hear what they're going through. So the more that you can suspend your judgments or sort of track them in your own head, but help them explore, I think the more that we have an open door so that when things do come up, they'll be more likely to tell us about it. I know that some students don't want us to be as intrusive as others. Some children talk to their parents about everything. I actually have, one of each here. That some of my friends will come to me and say, what's going on with so-and-so? Because I know your daughter tells you everything. Whereas my son, if I ask about a relationship, he's like, Mom, don't go there. Mm-hmm. So I think that it depends on the kid, but I think you have to kind of put it out there and show that you're not afraid to talk about it. And that you also know that these things come up in college. So I think specifically drugs and alcohol, important topics to talk about, and maybe even to share if there's any news stories or anything like that. I mean, I recently talked to my son about how some students are using study drugs and how some are laced and those kinds of things, and they've led to really terrible tragedies. I don't want to spend too much time on that with him because I don't want the fears too high, but at the same time, I want him to be really careful about his choices in that. I think also bringing up stuff around relationships and sexual decision making, those things are really important. And the more that we share and we model that we can talk about them, I think the more likely our students going to talk about them either to us or another mentor or their friends or potential romantic partner. So that's one of the areas that I do a lot of work with at Colgate is thinking about healthy relationships and helping students give consent and get consent is really tricky sometimes because people are trying to mind read each other rather than really saying, this is what I want to do. Are you interested in getting that consent? So if we do that in other ways, even talking through other things and really making sure that people are encouraged to assert their needs and also get consent from others, then we're going down the right track. So those are some of the tips that I would suggest is bring things up. Don't belabor anything because then your kid's not going to want to come to you about anything. But at the same time, be there, check in, and make sure that you're leaving a conversation with an open door. Hey, maybe you don't want to talk about this right now, but I want you to know I'm available whenever you need me. Those kinds of things.
Yeah, Dawn, I love the way you talked about the fact that the manner in which we react and respond to their telling us something is directly related to whether they will ever tell us anything again. That if we overreact, if we react in fear, and I sort of say, feel the fear and don't act on it, or feel the shock and manage that. Like we have to manage our emotions so that they can manage theirs. And I am a bit of a research geek. I love reading research studies, and all of the research say that parents who have conversations with their kids about drugs and alcohol, about their position with drugs and alcohol, make better choices. So when we kind of do this, it doesn't really work very well. So we sort of hope that our kids will make good choices. But really having conversations about the fact that alcohol is out there and it's available to them. Mm-hmm. And, they may be exposed to drugs in college and have those opportunities, and that you want them to make good choices. I talk with my kids and I talk with the clients I work with that they should always have a sober sister or brother. That if they're making a choice to use something, they don't know how their body's going to react or respond to it. And having somebody who has their wits about them to assist them in those moments is essential and could be life-saving. That, they are at school to go to school. So attending their classes is an expectation we have of our kids. And if alcohol or drugs impairs their ability to do that, that isn't, our expectation is that's not okay.
We actually, the other day, as we were talking to our son and we were talking about missing class and how important it is to get to class when he goes away, we did the calculation about how much each class is. Yeah. and it's very high. So that kind of put it in his mind that, wow, if I miss a class, it has this dollar amount on it. And, different things work for different kids. But I think right there, he's like, oh, wow, because he was trying to figure out when his earliest class will be and will he be able to get to his 8 a.m.s and whatnot. And we're like, if you're going to sign up for 8 a.m.s, you're going to get there because this is the dollar amount put to each of those. So, that's one strategy that might work for some families. But
yeah, I've heard
I
some
think that
families who charge students if they get a C or worse. So like, you're paying me back for that one.
I love it.
But, I think having an open conversation about it and being able to hear that there is peer pressure and there is expectations. And for many colleges, I think Colgate has a lot of various activities. If when you talked about organically having this conversation, it can come up around roommate selection, being honest in your roommate forms, so that you're really telling them, I don't want to drink, or I don't, or I do drink, or so that you're paired with somebody who has your temperament in that issue. Does Colgate have a sober living or wellness dorm?
We don't. We offered it this year, but unfortunately not enough students took advantage of that option. It is something on my agenda this year to really advertise more so that they can select into that. It was on the form this year, but I don't know that it was advertised as well as it could be. So I would love to see that happen. We do have a fantastic drug and alcohol counselor who has been thinking a lot about sober activities and wellness activities, making sure that, for instance, a big football game, if somebody wants to watch that in a lounge with other people over pizza, that's available, those types of activities. So we're doing more of that.
Similarly, encouraging your student to get involved in their whatever spiritual, realm they were in high school, they can connect with students like-minded on the college campus. And that's another organization that's going to have alternatives to the partying scene. Theater. I mean, there's just so many. Dance group, that will enable them to, if they're involved in sports, the expectation is they're going to refrain. And,
there's some really great outdoor education activities too for weekends and those types of things that, help people stay active. Also explore upstate New York, which is just gorgeous. I don't know that enough students get off. Our campus is gorgeous, but geez, if you go up to the Adirondacks and other places, I think you really get some really wonderful opportunities there too. But students sometimes need to seek those out. So during orientation, they learn about all of these things, but orientation is also so much stuff at once that another tip I'd have for parents is after they sort of settle in, ask them to keep exploring, because it's hard to know within that first week what you want to get involved in, but it doesn't mean that the ship has sailed. You can get involved in things throughout your 4 years, but to continue to explore those things, because you might change a lot while you're at college, and it might be a time that, hey, what I did in high school, that was great for that time being, but now I want to try something new. And what a great way to do that when you're with peers and you can meet other people while you're trying something new.
And taking risks. I do think that idea of, sort of looking for the uncomfortable. I will sometimes say, if it isn't illegal, immoral, or unethical, say yes. Because you're going to be invited to do all sorts of things. Just say yes. Like, go and do the thing that most of the time you'd say, no, I would never do that. Like my son was invited rock climbing, and he's not on the athletic bent of the population. And he was like, and I was like, remember what you said, get comfortable being uncomfortable. And he was like, I wasn't good at it, but I liked it. And I was like, and he met some new people, and
newness and exploring is so great. And that's a great segue. Thinking back to that notion of the first couple weeks of college, I personally remember feeling completely overwhelmed by having to set up my schedule, establish my schedule. How was I going to do class, fit in the hours I needed for my work study job, have time to seek out clubs and activities, join them and do them, make friends, and of course, there was homework. Are there ways to help, for family members to help their student feel ready for setting up that schedule, that they can think about now and talk about now?
Yeah, I think some of the things that come to mind for me is helping our students think about what's important to their wellness. So for some students, they really do need 8 or 9 hours of sleep. For other students, 6 to 7 is enough for them. But your student needs to know what they need in order to thrive. Same with food choices, I think, changing to a dining hall and having lots of options, but maybe not the same options. It's important that their nutrition is in line. And then activity level as well. So if they were an athlete in high school, but they're going to go to college and not be on a team, that activity level may still be really important to them. And I don't know that all people understand how beneficial activity can be to people. So there have been some studies that show that exercise is as good as an antidepressant for some people.
Mm-hmm.
So if there's somebody that, yeah, and maybe they've thrived having that exercise, and all of a sudden they're going to have a lifestyle where they're not as active. It's important for them to realize that might be something they need in their schedule. So that's sort of the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, is really thinking about what they need and can they get those things, and then where's their schedule, because they're going to school for classes and then all the other great stuff, but they need to figure out that academic component, and then what's going to give them balance. Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say that, I think there was a study that said, and certainly students who get into Colgate University, I would say the vast majority of them are going to report the academics are not the strong challenge. It's not that as they advance academically, going from sophomore to junior year, and see that the rigor doesn't increase. It does. But many of them have taken upwards of 10 or more AP classes, so they've managed that. It's the social and emotional piece that tends to be the greater challenge, and managing the stress, like you said. And I love that you pointed out, I call them the pillars. They sort of hold up our house: eating, sleeping, exercise, and social. Like without those four, you implode. And any one of them is weak, the others can't be as strong, right? So really asking your kids when, how are you doing with sleep? How are you doing with exercise? And not, again, no advice, no recommendations, no suggestions. You're not going to tell them what to do. But you can just kind of theorize. I'm wondering if you got more sleep, if you might have more energy, or if you ate a little better. And, really talking with them about the need for protein, the need for vegetables, I think freshmen coming onto campus often have fears because they've heard this, and it is a myth, by the way, the freshman 15. It's not a myth in that most students do gain some weight freshman year, but something like 96, I don't remember the most recent study, % of them level that off by sophomore year. So it isn't like I'm putting on these pounds and I'm never going to take them off the way, adults see this. But they fear it so much that often they're not making good, healthy choices in the cafeteria. So reminding them, you need to have a good amount of protein. You need to have vegetables, and you need some carbs because they provide energy too.
Right. And if we've been making meals for them that have protein, it may have just been something that they didn't really think through what they're getting, but they're just eating what's at the table or in the refrigerator. So really talking through some of that stuff, I think, is really important. And along the lines of the social is how much social do people need? And I have seen some students, because the first 3 weeks or so, there's not any exams or there's not assignments yet, but there's a lot of reading up front. But they don't do that and then get caught up with a month in, wow, I'm behind because I was doing all these other things. So I think that is important to have like a balanced conversation and all the different pillars that Melissa shared, thinking those through. And then what are my priorities? And sometimes people have too many priorities that you really have to sift through and say, okay, I really want to do well in X, Y, and Z, or I want to try X, Y, and Z versus I want to do it all. I think it's also important along those lines to think about my expectations in academics, because their grades might drop a little bit from where they were in high school. That's normal. I mean, especially for Colgate students, most of them are very highly functioning academics, but they come to Colgate with all these other highly performing academics, and there's going to be a shift. So there's going to be more B's and C's than students are used to. And how do they get used to that. That doesn't mean that they're failing. It just means that it's a little bit different, the grading scale and what they're learning. So I think that expecting that is important too.
Okay, this dovetails into my baloney story. I warned them that I was going to share my baloney story. So when I was a freshman in college, I was in a sociology class, and the professor's textbook and his lecture didn't sync. Something he said in the lecture conflicted with what was in the textbook, and I knew this was going to be on the exam. So I decided I would go to his office hours. And I sort of made my way into the basement of the arts and science building, and his door was just cracked open just ever so much. So I kind of leaned in and knocked on the inside. And I noticed that as I leaned in, he was just about to take a bite of what looked like a bologna sandwich. And I was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I'm interrupting your lunch." And he's like, "Oh, come on in, these are my office hours." And I introduced myself. I explained I was in his 250-person lecture hall, and I sat in the third row. And I said, I think there's a conflict between what you said in the lecture and what you said in the book. And he said, "Did you have lunch yet?" And I was like, "Oh no, he's going to offer me half his bologna sandwich." And I said, "No." And he said, "Great." And he threw his bologna sandwich in the garbage, and he took me to this restaurant that was on the top of the campus. Our campus had a hotel, 26-story hotel, and the top was called Top of the Campus. It was a restaurant and bar. And we're sitting there and we're talking, and he's asking me questions about myself and my history and where I'm from. And I'm just thinking, okay, is he coming on to me? I've seen all those movies, and I'm noticing that I am the only student seated. Like everybody, there are servers, and and finally I get up the nerve to say, "Do you do this often?" And he said, "Eat lunch?" And I said, No, take students to lunch." And he said, "Well, nobody ever comes to my office hours, so when they do, I reward them." Oh. And I went to his office hours, even when I wasn't in his classes. He was an advisor on my senior thesis. And just recognizing professors want their students to succeed, and they also want to get to know them. I mean, at Colgate, we're fortunate in that the classes are much smaller, so there's a lot more opportunity for professors to get to know your students. But when they're struggling, or if they're confused about the material, if the material's going too fast for them, the one thing we can do is just say, I wonder what would happen if you met with your professor and had a conversation with him about that or her about that.
Yeah, our professors choose to work at Colgate for those reasons. We have brilliant faculty who could choose to work in many, many places and do many different things, and they choose Colgate because of a lot of, I'm not going to speak for them, but I think for a lot of them, it's the size, it's the interaction they get to have with students.
With
it's
undergraduates.
With undergraduates doing tremendous things. So I think we're a really special community that's different than a lot of other campuses. And I think I love that story. Oh my gosh, that put a big smile on my face as far as, just that connection that the faculty want.
And now as a professor, I do the same thing. If somebody comes to my office hours, I reward them.
Yeah. And we missed that for a long time. And I think now that we're back and everyone's seeing each other again, we're all really hungry for those connections again. Mm-hmm.
Wonderful things to encourage the students to take advantage of, for sure. Since we're talking about bologna sandwiches, and you mentioned a little bit about the dining hall earlier, and I think that's a really important topic. Food, meal times, eating in general. That's a huge shift for a student starting college. And food is an important part, not only of, as you said, good health, having the energy to study and do your activities, but it's also wrapped up emotionally, right? Comforts of home, familiarity with family and culture. Food's the centerpiece of so many traditions and everyday events. And so, that adjustment to unfamiliar foods in the dining hall environment where, yes, food is not just put in front of you, but you have to wander around and make choices, and you have a limited amount of time because you have to get to class. New daily schedule. It could be a source of overwhelm. It can be a source of homesickness, or both. Are there ways that parents can from now till August, end of August, when their students come, help them do some advanced thinking about how they will approach eating at college that can help smooth that transition and make sure they're successful in all the other things they'll be doing at school?
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, that's a great question. It looks like Melissa has some thoughts, and then maybe I'll chime in.
I tell my kids, I tell my patients, and I talk with the parents I work with, about the fact that, food is fuel. So no fuel, no go. And a lot of parents are experiencing their students who, maybe are working a couple days a week or not having jobs this summer, sleeping in till 1 o'clock. And then, and one of the recognitions is you miss breakfast, you have an inadequate lunch, you're tuckered out by dinner. Your body really needs that food for energy. So, having conversations with them about how much their body needs to fuel to go. And when kids are feeling low motivation, low energy, low drive, one of the first questions I'm asking is, tell me about what you're eating. Like in an average day, give me yesterday. What'd you eat? And often you'll hear, I skipped breakfast, I had to run to class, and I didn't get back for lunch, so I had like a granola bar, and then, I had a good dinner, but that was it. And so, that idea of maintaining a healthy, good diet. And when you said sort of up until they get to school, I sort of smiled because I'm a part of a group of moms who do care packages. Like, we're a little crazy about it. But one of the things that we try and do is include in our care packages foods from home that their kids love, like, Trader Joe's. There isn't a Trader Joe's up there. Or it is, there's one, but it's far. So including some of the foods that your kids love that you can pack and send. And I will say, I figured out a way to freeze pack chicken soup.
Nice.
I'll share that with you. But, so just encouraging them to be mindful that this is one component of the 4 pillars that if it's not solid can really derail you. Mm-hmm. And we don't really think about it. And yeah, if you're a parent who makes all your meals for the kids, you're fixing them breakfast, you're fixing them lunch, you're fixing them dinner, I'm going to encourage you at this point, stop and, have them go to the supermarket and pick out foods and start to make some foods and, talk with them about, it used to be we could go to sort of buffets. There aren't a lot of buffets around these days. But when they're selecting food, you can have a conversation, the meal you chose is interesting. I don't see a whole lot of protein. And, you want about a fistful of protein for every meal. And, just kind of little tidbits like that to help them understand that's the fuel their body needs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it's also a good idea to encourage students to explore our town. It's small, but there's some cute little restaurants there. And sometimes getting off campus with a friend or a group of friends on a Friday evening or a Saturday or a Sunday breakfast can be a really nice break just to walk down the hill. We have a farmer's market that has lots of little specialties on Saturdays throughout the fall. So I think sometimes getting off campus can be really great. And one of the things
I'll interject, sorry, Dawn, that
you
can buy gift cards to some of the restaurants and stores in the community, and that will encourage your student to go down.
Yep. One of the areas that that comes up for me as we're thinking about food options and just options in general might be different levels of socioeconomic status, what people have as far as what they can bring and how often they can get into town, those types of things. So I think it's important to have those conversations too, wherever you are on that continuum. So if your student's somebody that's not going to be coming with extra cash to spend downtown, how do they learn to talk about that so that they're not in these awkward situations of, geez, a lot of my friends are going out to Friday at the Colgate Inn and I really can't afford to do that. Like, how can you help them prepare to have that conversation? And then on the other end of the spectrum, I think it's really important to talk to those students who come from a lot of means about how not everybody at Colgate does. So if they're just making that assumption that all of my friends, of course, can go out every Friday night to the Colgate Inn, they might be completely wrong with that. And just to really understand how that might affect some people if they can't. So I think that kind of conversation is important too. As far as like making friends, really valuing one another and affirming where people come from and their backgrounds. And I've noticed that that's come out at Colgate quite a bit as far as the haves and the have-nots, and just how to be comfortable in your skin with whatever situation you have, but also really respecting the differences of others.
I'll piggyback on that and just do a little conversation about finances
Mhm.
and how much, even for those of us, who you may have wealth or means. One of my first clients was a young man who went off to college. Parents gave him a credit card, encouraged him to make friends, and he decided to buy the whole building pizza. He said, I was making friends. And it was like, no, that wasn't the kind of friends we wanted, So what is an acceptable or amount, that they can charge, and how often do you think they should be going out to dinner, or, getting Grubhub, or I don't know, can you do DoorDash and Grubhub in Hamilton? I think
There's some smaller versions of that, yes.
students have created those. So just having a conversation about what are the limits and what are our expectations about.
Great advanced conversations to have. A quick shift. So you mentioned earlier a couple of points on this topic, but I just wanted to round back quickly. In anticipation, there may be times when students call home with a specific challenge that they're encountering. So just to help parents and guardians think ahead, what advice do you have in terms of how they can best approach responding if they do get that phone call about some problem or issue that the student is, clearly asking for help?
So I would say that it's important not to take on their anxiety, but to help them figure out how to face their situation. So this could take on a lot of different areas, but taking a deep breath, thinking things through. Most things don't call for a reaction right away. So I often tell people in lots of different situations, maybe you don't have to respond right away. Maybe you can think things through and then give a response. So I think this is particularly important with our children who we care so much about, is not to jump in, but to really take your time to think it through, to help them articulate what's going on and their feelings around whatever's going on, and help them come up with their options. And then maybe weigh in, but don't problem solve for them. So that would be where I would really try to hold back. I think it's our natural inclination to problem solve, to fix, but I don't know that that's doing our children the best benefit in the long run.
I like to think about the ways in which our rushing to solutions impedes their ability to come up with their ideas and options for how to handle it. So being more of a little bit of a sociologist. So I said earlier, no advice, no recommendations, no suggestions. And I literally had a sticky note on my computer that said this. So when my kids would call or FaceTime, it would be like, no advice, no recommendations, no suggestions. Remember this, because I don't always practice what I preach. And unless they specifically ask, Mom, what should I do? And then if they do that, I'm going to hem and haw. I'm going to say, well, I don't know. When I went to school back in the dinosaur days, it was so much different. And maybe, is there somebody who you could talk to? Is there, we had a floor mommy person. Do you have one of those? What about, I don't know, is there a dean of your department? If you've spoken to the professor, and I just, maybe what would happen if you spoke to that person, or, and just kind of throwing out some ideas, but in a much less definitive, this is what you need to do. I tell parents this story, so I'll share, and please feel free to delete this if it's too long. But when I was in college, I was a freshman, I called my mother hysterical. And it sounded like this. Mom, my roommate is coming in the middle of the night with men, and she's turning off my alarm clock, and then she doesn't listen to me, and she blasts music, and I can't study there, and I have 3 tests and 2 exams and a paper, and I don't know what the paper's supposed to be about, and I'm freaking out, and I don't know what to do. And she said, okay, this is what you need to do. First, you need to meet with your RA, and you need to set up a meeting with your RA and your roommate, and you need to set up a roommate contract, and you need to iron that out. You need to find a cubby in the library where you can study, and you need to go meet with that professor and figure out what that paper is about. And don't forget, call your grandmother. And I was on the 26th story of my dorm, and if there weren't bars on the window, I would have jumped. But I picked up the phone and I called my grandmother, and I threw up on her everything I had just said to my mother. And my grandmother said, oh, you poor thing. that's awful. What a horrible roommate you have. What are you going to do about that? And I said, I don't know, maybe I could talk to the RA. What's that? Oh, it's the person on the floor who's like a floor mommy. I didn't go to college. That's interesting. What would they do? Well, maybe they could help us iron out some rules about the room. And, okay, what about that paper? What are you going to do about that? and at the end of the call, she said, I know you're going to figure this all out. You always do. I have faith in you. And hung up, and I was like, the difference, the visceral difference of my mother, who clearly took on my stress, wanted to help me, had all the right answers, but basically made me feel incapable because she told me what to do. And my grandmother, who just sort of said, who listened and kind of went for the feelings more than the content, and kind of helped me figure out, I got this. This isn't so bad.
Can you share her number with all of us? She sounds amazing.
She lived to 103. She is no longer alive, but I hear her voice in my head a lot, and I share her voice with my patients, with my kids, so they can carry her.
Wow. So talking about anxiety, I think it's important that I ask you both, what recommendations do you have for a family whose student who has had specific mental health issues in the recent past? Thinking about preparing for college, the time between now and getting to school.
Sure. So I think that it's important to coordinate care and to figure out those next steps. So if somebody is already in treatment, then they have a number of different things they should be thinking about. One is, will they continue a relationship with their treatment provider from home when they're at school? A lot of treatment providers now offer telehealth. And for some people, that relationship is so significant that continuing that relationship with that person is a great possibility. There are state to state restrictions on those types of things, so it really depends on your situation. If a person wants to transfer their care to Colgate, then we have an amazing counseling center. It is going to be a little bit different than somebody's situation perhaps from home, because we are really the mental health shop for all of Colgate. Because we're in a rural spot, we really don't have a lot of good referral options. So students who start counseling with a Colgate Counseling Center usually meet with one of us about every other week. So if they're used to weekly therapy, we would need to transition them. But we also have up to 13 different therapy groups going each week, and our students love those. So once they get in a group, they might be a little nervous to get into it, but they sometimes don't stop for the whole time they're at Colgate, and they really sort of grieve the loss of that group when it's over. So I'd encourage your student to look at those options. We have some groups that are specific to different populations or different things. So for instance, my colleague is developing an ADHD focused concentration group this semester for students who struggle with those types of things. They can work together to develop those skills. So depending on what your student is going through, what they've worked through before, and what their needs are, we can help them meet that. I'd also like to encourage them to think about their medication options. So we certainly don't want a student to run out of medication when they get to Colgate. And sometimes it takes a while to transfer that kind of care. So will their provider at home be able to continue to prescribe for them, and can they pick their medication up at a local pharmacy, make that transition really easy? Can they have check-ins over breaks with their provider? Or do they want to transfer that care to Colgate? And if they do, I would ask that they work on that sooner rather than later, just so that we can make sure that our student health services is on board with that. And we also have a psychiatric care provider who we work with through the Mantra system, which is a telehealth system, but it's integrated with our student health services and our counseling center. So we have all of those things that we can provide, but we would like your student to really start getting those wheels turning now if they haven't. And I just purposefully said your student, because this is one place that you can push them to be more independent and work with us rather than you making those calls. I did talk to a mom last week who had her daughter on speakerphone. So that was great too. I got to talk to both of them. But really my focus was more getting to know that student and what they need as they transition.
So I'm going to do two things in responding to this question. One is piggybacking on what Dawn said about I love that this mom called with her daughter on speakerphone. So for some of you, your kids don't quite know how to do these things independently quite yet. So I'm going to plug a book. You can delete this, but I love this book, How to Raise an Adult by Julie Lythcott-Haims. And one of the things that Julie says is, we go through sort of 4 stages of learning how to do something new. One is we do it for them. We do it for them, they watch us. They do it, we watch them, and then they do it independently. So you have to kind of think about where your kid is at with, getting their medication, attending their therapy appointments, rescheduling appointments that get canceled, and really helping them to do those things independently. I know that I believe Colgate also has walk-in hours. Mm-hmm. So, that's a place where you can get support at various times. The hours for the walk-ins are...
Yep, they're 9 to noon and 1:30 to 4:30 Monday through Friday, where we have a counselor just available for those. So students come, they check in with our receptionist, who is amazing, and then a counselor comes to greet them, and they're able to talk through whatever's going on, and then figure out from there, what are my resource options? Yeah.
And that is so fabulous. And that's a great resource, not just for your child, but if your child calls with my roommate is struggling or my floor mate or friend, you can say, maybe you want to just walk them over and hold their hand and tell them I'll go with you. There's a center up the hill, a yoga, meditation.
Yeah, so we have the Chapel House, where there is meditations offered most mornings. And that is, I think, an underutilized resource. It is gorgeous up there, and it's such a great place, staffed by wonderful colleagues, that I think every student should at least try out.
Yeah, this was something that Sam found, I think, in her later years at Colgate. And sort of it was one of the places where she would go for just quiet contemplation, kind of just to be alone and have kind of, her own time. And, she did take advantage of the meditation hour on occasion and loved it. So
that's great. Another thing that we're advertising more this year, it just really started, so it's in its sort of early time still, but I'm hoping that it takes off more this year, is our peer coaches. So these are students who have gone through a peer coaching class through our Shaw Wellness Institute and put in hours each week to be available for students who are going through different things. So they might not require the help of sort of a professional counselor, or they might do both, that they do counseling, but they also have a peer coach. And that's somebody they meet with to talk through some of the adjustment kinds of things, or study skills, habits, maybe negotiating things with a roommate, some of those areas that certainly a professional counselor could help with, but sometimes the peer-to-peer advice is really nice, rather than talking to somebody who graduated from college so many years ago, and my life's very different than college students. So I think looking at that as an option, and if parents could help encourage students to find a peer coach, I think that would be really helpful to get that program going and launched to the place we want it to be.
And the other piece I'll mention is a lot of times students have academic challenges. So they may have had an IEP or a 504 in their high school, and they're coming to college. Colleges don't automatically institute, and professors don't automatically institute accommodations without the students advocating for themselves. So going to the student support services and letting them know what's going on if they're struggling, or if they need note taker or additional time on exams, or talking with their professors, again, the baloney story, is really helpful, because the professor might not recognize that you have ADHD or a movement disorder. And once they do, they can make accommodations, and they want, again, their students to succeed.
Yeah. So our Office of Disability Services, that's another place that I would encourage parents and students to be in touch with earlier rather than later, because it's important to at times collect documentation and other types of things so that a student's file is up to date with what their needs are. And then they can have that conversation with one of my colleagues in that office about really, what are your needs? Do you need longer test time? Do you need to take tests in a quiet room? Do you need the note taker? What do you need in order to be successful here? And some students say, oh, I want a fresh start. I don't want any of that stuff in college, and just see how I do. Mm-hmm. I would recommend that you actually go in the other direction and get the assistance, and then pull back from it if you decide you don't need it, rather than just sort of jumping in without the things that maybe you're used to, or the things that could really help you thrive.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we've talked about so much, many topics that can help family members get their student ready to thrive here at Colgate. I want to thank both of you so much for this conversation. Before we cut it off officially, are there any last tidbits that you wanted to share that I didn't ask you about?
So I'm going to kind of talk to the parents about what we're going to go through. This process of your child leaving the womb, literally your nest that you created, and the fears and anxieties and excitement and thrill in many ways of that process, just to be kind of cognizant of how you're feeling and filling that void. Really getting back in touch with hobbies or experiences that you loved and didn't have time to do during the sort of flurry of parenting experiences, and to begin to kind of, while they're launching, kind of to let go, to give yourself permission to get back to yourself and your family, other family members that are home, or friends, or whatever, buoys you.
That's perfect. I don't have anything else to share at this point, except for a thank you to both you, Rebecca, and you, Melissa, for doing this alongside me. And we welcome questions from parents, especially questions from students. So if you could, as you're talking to your student, if they want to reach out or they want you to reach out, if you could nudge them to do it, I think we'd be moving in the right direction. So really appreciate all your time this morning.
Thanks to both of you. And you can always send an email to parents@colgate.edu. I get those emails. Any questions that have come up out of this conversation, feel free to shoot us an email and we'll get you an answer. Thanks very much.